Imagine if you could pinpoint the exact tiny fraction of your efforts, your inventory, or even your team's habits that give you the absolute highest returns. Well, you actually can. In this explainer, we're diving into a concept that is an absolute game changer for how we see the world. We are demystifying ABC analysis. We're going to see how a mathematical rule used to organize giant, chaotic supply chains actually shares the exact same DNA as human behavioral psychology. It is a fascinating connection, and it's kind of going to change how you prioritize your entire life. Let's get started.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Decoding the 80-20 rule. 2. Classifying A, B, and C items. 3. The power of prioritization. 4. The pitfalls of Pareto. And 5. A really cool pivot into the behavioral ABCs. Section 1. Decoding the 80-20 rule, the principle of the vital few. If you've ever tried to run a business or a department or even just manage a big project, you know the absolute chaos of trying to treat every single input equally. It is exhausting, and honestly, it is highly inefficient. So think about this. What if you only needed to tightly control 20% of your business to secure 80% of your success? Just imagine the time, energy, and capital that would free up. It sounds like wishful thinking, but it's actually the ultimate organizational cheat code. That cheat code is known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. It comes from the research of Vilfredo Pareto, who made this rather startling discovery. He found that about 80% of all the wealth in the Italian cities he was researching was held by just 20% of the families. And that massive disproportion, a tiny input creating a huge output, it didn't just stay in economics. We've found that it applies to almost everything, right down to modern quality control and inventory management.
Section 2. Classifying A, B, and C. Structuring the chaos.
Okay, let's look at how this foundational Pareto principle perfectly powers ABC analysis in materials management. The whole idea is that we don't treat all inventory the same. We separate the vital few from the trivial many. Just look at the stark visual contrast here. Your Class A items, they only make up about 15 to 20% of your physical stuff, but a whopping 80% of your total inventory value. Then you've got Class B, sitting moderately in the middle. And finally, Class C. These items make up 50% of the stuff in your warehouse, but they only contribute to 5% of the value. They are literally just taking up space and cluttering the shelves. And this graph brilliantly illustrates that exact dynamic. This is the cumulative frequency ABC curve. When you rank your stock items by their usage value and plot them on this curve, you can visually see the Pareto effect in action. Notice how incredibly steep that curve is right at the beginning? That is your Class A inventory doing all the heavy lifting. Then, as you move along the bottom axis, the curve basically flatlines, showing that the remaining 50% of your items barely move the needle at all on total value.
So you might be wondering, how do we actually figure out what belongs in Class A? It is a super simple mathematical calculation. You just take the usage rate of an item over a certain period, and you multiply it by its unit cost. That gives you the annual requirement value. In this table, you can see a real-world example where a company calculates that consumption value for 20 items, ranks them from highest to lowest, and boom, the vital few bubble right to the top.
Section 3. The power of prioritization, managing the vital few. Now that we know how to identify our VIPs, the real magic happens when we apply completely different management strategies to each bucket. Think about how you manage these extremes. For Category A items, you need very strict control, frequent ordering, highly accurate forecasts, and rigorous value analysis. You monitor these things like a hawk. But Category C, relax. Low control, minimal effort. You might just bulk order these once every 6 months. It's kind of like a restaurant. If 20% of the menu items account for 80% of the profit, the owner needs to pay close, real-time attention to optimizing those specific ingredients instead of wasting time counting extra toothpicks in the back room. By applying selective inventory control this way, the advantages are just massive. It immediately supercharges organizational efficiency because your efforts are concentrated exactly where they have the biggest impact. But it also really enhances group problem-solving skills. When your team gets together and focuses consensus on the highest-ranked issues identified by this analysis, you achieve maximum organizational benefit with the least amount of wasted effort. It roots every decision in actual, measured impact. Section 4. Pitfalls of Pareto. The limitations of the chart. As much as I absolutely love this framework, I do have to caution you. No tool is perfect, and relying on it blindly can definitely lead to trouble. The biggest limitation of a Pareto chart is this. It is very easy to make, but incredibly difficult to troubleshoot. A Pareto analysis will absolutely point you to where your control efforts are best directed. For example, it might show you that half of all your organizational problems are happening in shipping and receiving, but it provides absolutely zero insight into the root causes. It tells you exactly what is broken, but not why.
Because of this, Pareto analysis has some serious limitations. It merely shows qualitative data, just frequencies you can observe. It cannot be used to calculate quantitative statistics like averages, variability, or whether a process can actually stay within specification limits. To truly fix a broken process, you can't rely on Pareto alone. You need supporting tools like failure modes effect charts or cause and effect charts. In fact, to find the true underlying cause of an issue, you often have to drill down 2 or 3 layers of Pareto charts just to figure out what is really going on.
Section 5. The behavioral ABCs, from inventory to people.
Now wait for it, because here comes the fascinating pivot I promised you. We've talked exclusively about supply chains, boxes, and materials. But the exact same structural thinking used to manage physical inventory, it applies directly to managing human behavior. Because ultimately, managing employees and organizational behavior is basically just a result of understanding influences and determining outcomes.
This spills into an entirely different kind of ABC analysis. Here, ABC stands for antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. It's a really simple but profound formula. Antecedents are the events that prompt or trigger behaviors, and behaviors are subsequently followed by consequences. But here is where the Pareto principle beautifully ties back in. Look at the influence these elements actually have. Antecedents, things like a memo we put out or what we say to an employee, they precede behavior, but they only have short-term effects, and they are massively overused by leaders. They only account for about 20% of influence. Consequences, on the other hand, follow the behavior, and they hold an incredible 80% of the influence on whether a desired behavior will actually happen again. Consequences are the true Category A driver of human behavior.
Since consequences are our Category A priority, we need to know how to engineer them. And that brings us to E-tip analysis: effect, timing, importance, and probability. Every consequence possesses these 4 characteristics. Does it encourage or discourage? Is it immediate or delayed? Is it highly important or low importance to the person performing the action? And is it actually likely to occur? By designing consequences that are encouraging, immediate, highly important, and consistently applied, leaders can drastically emphasize the desired behaviors in their workforce.
So, what does this all mean for you? I leave you with this final, provocative thought to take away today. Whether you are managing millions of dollars of physical stock or managing a team of human beings, the 80-20 rule is running in the background. What are the Category A priorities in your own operations, the vital few that drive 80% of your success? And, maybe more importantly, are your behavioral consequences actually aligned to protect and encourage them? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.